Hello and welcome out there. Welcome to another installment of the Goddess Keys chill session. Chill, kind of more podcasty, chatting it up. It's a transmission. The name of this particular transmission is The Sun Sets on the False Mother. A message from the Partheogenic Creatrix. And today we're going to discuss the difference between a Creatrix and the Matrix. And it has a lot to do with the difference between the Partheogenic Creatrix or goddess and the false mother in the simulation. So I hope that whenever you receive this message, that it finds you well. You know, the vibes have shifted. I was literally, it was maybe like an hour ago, I was about to go on live and like literally my, the whole town had like a little blackout for like, I don't know, a good 50 minutes. And the best way I could describe the frequency I was in right before I was going to go live is I was kind of more in the frequency of like red. Like I was having that energy of like the fiery Leo frequency. I was tapping into the energies of Neith. And we're going to discuss a little bit about Neith and also the way that particular goddess or archetype has been a little distorted. So for folks who have connected with the frequencies of Neith, this might be of interest to you. Or if you've just been interested in general of this concept of the Partheogenic goddess, or the ability for the goddess to seed herself, to seed creations herself from her own generative space. As it was at one particular point prior to the Matrix. There was more of a Creatrix sort of frequency. And then somewhere down the line, we ended up in the Matrix. So we're going to discuss it a little bit. But yeah, it was like kind of a weird jolt, you know, literally like boom, blackout session. So I was tapping into some very dark feminine energies, though, right before I was going to go live. And then I had this experience of a blackout. And so I spent some time with those energies in meditation because there was like really nothing else to do. You know, no lights, no internet, you know, kind of just, you turn within in those moments. So I had a moment of like, okay, well, the fire that I had originally when I was going to go live kind of got a little dimmed, not in a negative way, but I went through a black hole sort of situation. And so I was thinking like, well, dang, am I still going to go live? And it's like, you know, when I do cultivate certain transmissions, it's also because there's certain energies that I'm moving through, and me being able to do a transmission also supports me with certain things I'm moving through, because I can record, I can get the energies or the frequencies, and there's just something about going live that helps me to put things together more. So I don't want to save this message for another day, because another day I'm going to be on a different frequency. So anyway, all that to say, I'm a little groggier. Like I might have even made a different thumbnail. But, you know, it is what it is. So we're going to move with the energies. I have some, what is it? Like not a cappuccino, a frappuccino, a caramel frappuccino. It's like about to be 9 o'clock at night. And I'm drinking a caramel frappuccino. I'm taking a walk on the wild side, y'all. Because I have some pages of notes. And I have some resources and readings to get through as well. And I want to make sure that I take the time to go into these particular notations. So I'm getting a little pick-me-up, all right? And I also am mentioning this whole blackout thing because just in case it happens again, okay? If I get abruptly cut off, I won't be able to necessarily come back on that quickly. So I just also want to just make a note of that experience just in case, because I don't know, these energies that we're tapping into is a little bit more chaotic, you know? So, all that to say, I want to take a moment to open up a portal for the Partheogenic goddess to come through, the Partheogenic Creatrix to come through. These messages have been coming for me very strongly since early yesterday morning. And sometimes it's felt like spitting fire. Like it's like, I think there's been a pressure point. A lot of stuff that we're going to talk today, I've been feeling energetically, maybe y'all have too, but it's been more in the astral. It's been more in other realms, you know, and you get little peekaboos in your particular life around how these things show up. But, you know, for example, the whole karmic mother frequency, if you have been somebody who have experienced or navigated being, growing up with a karmic mother, growing up with a mother that where maybe the relationship was a bit fractured, maybe it felt as though they didn't want to see you progress, they didn't necessarily want to see you thrive, not even as much in their words, but in their actions. Well, as above, so below. As within, so without. So we want to talk about what's going on in the regular scripting of the matrix. But if you've had that experience with a karmic mother, we also want to bring that into other realms. We want to go deeper with it. So when we go through this awakening process, it happens in layers. It happens when we are ready to receive the information. The amount of gaslighting that we've collectively been a part of or that we've experienced as a society, as a matrix, it can be pretty appalling. It would be too much to just get all of the information at once. It would be too jarring, okay? So sometimes the information comes to us when we are ready to receive it, and it comes in layers and stages. So one of those layers and stages was, okay, I have a karmic mother. I have a mother maybe where it's not really beneficial for me to talk to them on a daily basis, or maybe at all, depending upon what your situation is. Because there is an aspect of the way this matrix has been designed for the mother to be the gatekeeper, to be the one that keeps the matrix going. That was the role that the mother was assigned in the simulation. And I also just want to do, I'm not going to do trigger. I'm not going to call it a trigger warning. But I am going to say that maybe some of this information, this might be a message where it's not something that you're fully able to receive in the moment that you first get it. It might be something you come back to. And that's okay. You know, you will trust your own inner judgment. You will trust your own discernment around whether or not this is information that you want to take in currently, or maybe bookmark it for another day or pass on it entirely. Totally up to you. But there are this isn't really to be sugar-coated as I drink my caramel frappuccino. That being said, the message itself isn't really meant to be sugar-coated. It's coming from the Partheogenic Creatrix, the Partheogenic goddess, who exists outside of the matrix. So a lot of the things that we've been taught about what a goddess is, what a mother is, what creation is, it's been distorted within the boundaries, within the bindings of a particular infrastructure that wanted to gatekeep what creation is, that wanted to gatekeep what motherhood is. So maybe even some of the ways that I share particular pieces of information might be considered a little taboo or a little off-putting. But this is the frequency of the Partheogenic goddess. This isn't really the mother frequency that we grew up with or that we were socially conditioned to see as being acceptable or being valuable. The best archetype that they have for us in the Matrix, she lives like, basically she's like on the boundaries of the Matrix or the simulation, but she transcends it. And that would be the frequency of Goddess Kali, who is also known to eat time. She's also known as being the Black Mother, the Dark Mother. She's also known as being the Terrible Mother. What does that mean? That might mean that you might be considered a terrible mother. To connect with your primordial creational codes. They told you that in the mythology of Kali, she eats time in order to transcend time, which is a Saturnian binding, which is a binding ritual to keep the matrix going. The secret to Kali was that in order for her to eat time, and in order for her to transcend the boundaries of the matrix, the simulation, the thing that collectively we know that there's this structure, there's this architecture that keeps us bound, that keeps us sometimes feeling a little bit more limited, a little bit more constricted. The secret to Kali, and by the way, her colors are, the primary one is black, but it's also red and it's also a little bit of white, depending upon, what yantra you're looking at. But for her to eat time and for her to go into that black hole energy of timelessness, boundlessness, unlimited infinite potential, she's also known as being the terrible mother. So let that sink in. So let's start with the etymology of matrix. Matrix refers to a womb, source, or breeding female. It's also known as being a constructed reality or system. We really want to do a snapshot on the breeding female energy. Because what do we hear a lot of times? We hear about the matrix being constricting, but then we also hear, like when people are talking about the divine feminine, when they're talking about the divine mother, they also discuss how the matrix is the mother. And they uplift it. They say, okay, yeah, the feminine is the God, is the God. The goddess moves through the matrix. The goddess creates the matrix. But it's like, what frequency of the goddess created the matrix? It was a divided goddess. And we know that even in the etymology of what matrix is. Matrix is one of the etymologies is breeding female. It's giving domesticated farm animal. Let that sink in. Meanwhile, Creatrix, she who creates, or female creator. Also, I guess I didn't write down this definition, but another one I want to bring to the surface was a definition that said female agent who creates, which I kind of liked. I like this idea of being an agent, even though a lot of times when we think of agent, it's usually talked about negatively in the simulation. It's somebody who is playing both sides. It's somebody who is being sneaky. It's somebody who's being underhanded. But really, an agent is really somebody who's able to make things happen. They're able to create the circumstances that they specifically want. They're not just passively following a script. When you transcend the NPC programming of the simulation, you are being an agent. You are having agency. Now, a lot of times when we hear about agents, it's usually, either you're thinking of like CIA agent, or, if we think about celebrity agents, a lot of times there's a little bit of like a not so great taste in your mouth as it relates to these things. But it's really just somebody who has the autonomy to make things move in their world. And there's that frequency of agency as it relates to Creatrix, to uplift. So matrix, breeding female. Creatrix, she who creates. Female creator. Female agent who creates. It's a different frequency. This is why the sun is setting on the false mother. Now, this is something to, I've been sitting with this message for quite some time. And because there is such a strong feminine force that creates the matrix, you don't necessarily want to disrespect the mother. Okay? You don't want to disrespect the mother, because there's this weird thing with the way that the matrix was constructed. This is how the mother, the false mother anyway, becomes, or we'll just say mother. Because to be honest, like a creatrix isn't necessarily a mother. That's another thing. And I was just conflating this, and it's different actually. Mother refers more to a womb, breeding, okay, not necessarily creation. It's a little different. It's a little bit of a different frequency, because this message is being sponsored. We'll bring in a sponsorship today. This message is being sponsored by the Partheogenic goddess. A Partheogenic goddess, a Partheogenic creatrix doesn't need to breed to create. They're self-seeding. I was looking at the etymology of partheogenesis, and it goes into virgin generation, or generation from a virgin, being self-seeding. This is really interesting, because I wasn't putting together the energies of virgin with partheogenesis as much as I probably should have been earlier in my last live. And it's funny, I saw this guy when I was out today taking a walk. He had this, I think he's like a teenager. He had this hoodie that said "Virginity Rocks" on it. And I got such a kick out of seeing that hoodie. I was like, oh, I wish I found a shirt like that. I would totally rock that shirt that said "Virginity Rocks." But I think it was just me starting to connect the dots with partheogenesis and virginity. Okay. We think about, like, for example, of course, we have the Virgin Mary. We also have the frequency of Isis as well. That Isis gets a little bit conflated with the energy of the Matrix, because she utilizes Osiris's phallus in order to create Heru. But in another sense, she did all the work, okay? And at some point, she was self-seeding, but her story got told and revamped so many times until finally the story was created to bring about a certain narrative within the matrix or the simulation to kind of keep things status quo. But definitely the Virgin Mary, there was more of an energy of that virgin birth, okay? And there was definitely some stigma related to it. Even if you think about Joseph, I feel like Joseph, I believe that's the guy's name. Joseph is Mary's husband. I should look at some biblical quotes. Next time I might need to bring some biblical quotes as it relates to this story a little bit more. But I feel like Joseph got lucky in the situation. The way that a lot of the um, the different priests, they talk about Joseph was like, oh wow, he was such an upstanding man. His wife had this virgin birth, and the son wasn't his, but he took care of business. He was an upstanding man, and he basically was a good guy in the situation and didn't leave her out on the streets. But the way I see it is like he cashed out. Joseph cashed out. What are you talking about? Wait, what's that? I hope that's his name, Joseph. Um, yeah, I don't think it's Jacob. But anyway, I feel like, or I know it starts with a J. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm just gonna call him the Virgin Mary's husband. Okay, I'm gonna call him the Virgin Mary's husband. The Virgin Mary's husband cashed out in that situation because he gets to be a part of this epic story, this miraculous story. He gets to be in close proximity to a goddess, number one, a self-seeding Partheogenic goddess, which I'm sure came with a lot of benefits for him. Okay. And on top of that, his stepson is Jesus Christ, like the prophet, like the miracle worker. He cashed out. It's not him being an upstanding man. He was at the right place at the right time. That's how I see it. I've always kind of seen it like that. But anyway, all that to say, the Virgin Mary's story in the Bible is probably one of the closest things, the closest remnants that we can find to partheogenesis. And it has to do with virginity. But really, it's, when we think about virginity, we automatically think of purity with that, right? We think about, okay, yeah, they haven't been sullied by sex, they're pure. And then you get into the frequencies of the Vestal virgins. You also have those Melissai bee priestesses as well in Rome. And these priestesses were also set apart. They were also considered virgins, pure. But we're not getting the full story. Really, if you've connected with the frequencies of the Melissai, those bee priestesses from Rome, or the Vestal virgins, you're connecting with Partheogenic codes. Also, if you've connected with the frequencies of like the Virgin Mary as well. Isis, like to a lesser extent, but yeah, if you've connected with those sort of temple priestess frequencies, it's very likely that you're carrying Partheogenic codes. And when we think about the sorts of feminines that get exploited even today by priesthoods or by one percenters, don't they tend to be more like younger virgins? But I actually think that's the cover. I think the code in it is the ones that are going to be the most targeted sometimes are going to be the ones who carry Partheogenic codes, which is another word for virgin. And it has nothing to do with whether or not you've had sex before. It's, can you self-seed? Can you seed your own creations? So a lot of times we think of virgins as being young teenagers who haven't had sex. But that's just what we're able to perceive in the limited scope that we've been given within this matrix, which refers to a breeding female. But if you move outside of that, virgins and the frequency of a virgin and what these beings are utilizing to harvest the energy of virgins, it's really about harvesting these Partheogenic self-seeding codes. Okay? And so if you've held these frequencies of partheogenesis, then that might have been part of the reason why you may have been caught up in energies related to energy harvesting, destiny swapping. It's because of those Partheogenic virgin codes, but it has nothing to do with sex. It's a little bit deeper than that. Now, when you incarnate and you enter the matrix through your mother's womb, your mother is your God in a lot of ways. You came through her portal. So we enter a fine dance. We dance a fine line with this, because you don't want to necessarily disrespect your mother or you don't want to disrespect your mother, because and I don't even know if disrespect is the correct phrasing for this, but you definitely want to think about how you regard the portal that you came into this incarnation with, because there is an alchemical relationship that you're going to have with that portal, even if you don't talk to your biological mother, or if you don't have a relationship with them, if you're not able to, you're connected with her through that creational portal. So you might have to go through periods of time in which you don't talk to this person, or this being, because maybe it's really difficult. Maybe there's some warfare sort of situations that you might go through with these sorts of energies. And yet at the same time, that's still the portal you entered this incarnation with. So I struggled with that for a little bit, because I could see the way this karmic mother program was being carried out. And yet there was also this frequency of the mother being God, okay? Because quite literally, like she portaled you in here. And with that sort of God power, a lot of that has been utilized to distort. It's been utilized to oppress. It's been utilized to keep you contained. Almost like a weird overseer, slave master kind of thing sometimes. And the sad part is that a lot of times this is just written in the grid systems. This is just written in your astrology chart. If you're somebody who's incarnated with Partheogenic codes, it's very likely that you've had a distorted relationship with your biological mother. But that's just a part of the scenario that you're moving through. As within, so without, as above, so below. That's also happening in other realms with other mother type frequencies that more of us are going to be waking up to and unearthing. But you can start by having clear eyes to see as it relates to your birth chart, looking at your birth chart, looking at what's going on in your birth chart. And if you're able to, looking at your biological mother's birth chart. And then also start looking at the astral cartography. How is your astral cartography interacting with each other? That's another big way to look at things as well. So that's something I support folks with as it relates to beyond the birth chart readings, as well as astral cartography readings. So there's a link in my bio if that's something that is of interest to you. So we got a lot to move through here, y'all. We have a lot to move here. Let me see where we're going to start. Where's the best place to start? So we talked about the etymology of mother. Oh, actually, I didn't give the etymology of mother yet. We talked about the etymology of matrix, which refers to a womb, source, or breeding female. It's also a constructed reality or system, but it's stewarded through the portal of the mother. We talked about the etymology of creatrix, which is she who creates, a female creator or a female agent who creates. It's a different frequency. We talked about the etymology of partheogenesis, which has a lot to do with virgin creation, which simply means being able to self-generate. Let's move into the etymology of creation. Creation means to cause to grow, increase, crescendo, to make, to produce. So here's how you know if you're in a karmic dynamic with your mother. Do you feel as though you're able to grow, to increase, and to, just generally create to your state of fulfillment? Or do you feel as though sometimes that energy has been hindered? If your answer is, yeah, that energy's felt hindered, I felt boxed in, well, that's a false dynamic. Because we're going to go back to the energies of rank and hierarchy. So we're not here to disrespect the goddess. We're not here to disrespect creation. We're not here to disrespect anything that causes things to grow, to create, to seed. So on that note, if there is a frequency, mother or not, if there is a frequency that is blocking growth, that is blocking your ability to create, that is a false frequency. That is not God. That's a false God frequency. So as much as it might seem as though in the matrix that your mother is like your God, and sometimes that can be written into your birth chart, peep that. That can be written into your birth chart. So there could be these like puppet strings or spider's webs that are being orchestrated through this matrix mother frequency. And a lot of people won't peep it. If you are in sleep state, it'll just be, maybe sometimes you'll get annoyed with your mother, that kind of thing, but you respect your mother, you love your mother, you make sure that you guys have a decent relationship. You put up with things. When you're in sleep state, it's fine. Okay, maybe it's a little annoying, but you deal with it. The problem happens when you are entering your remembrance of your goddesshood, your ability to create, your being a creatrix. That's when shit hits the fan. Because then there's a power grab. There's this like power sort of wrestling. Because you are getting out of according to the false mother, like the matrix mother program, you are now getting out of your jurisdiction. Because that matrix mother is supposed to be your God. That's supposed to be your gatekeeper. They're supposed to weave your web. And now you're stepping on her toes. And now you're trying to create your own? Warfare. That's when the karmic mother program really, really takes effect. It has nothing to do with, whether or not your mother's a good person, whether or not they love you. I mean, I'm sure they do love you to the extent that they're able to. But this is a matrix. This is about a constructed reality or system, which is held together through breeding females. This is a structural issue. And we've already discussed in the last live how love is not what we were marketed. It's something else. So for more information about going into depth about love, then you can check out the last live. So it's not an issue. The karmic mother program isn't an issue for you until you step into your godhood, your goddesshood, your creatrix potential, remembering your Partheogenic codes. Then it's a problem. Then it's warfare. And it's more overt as well in that particular case. Because it's going to be very difficult for you to be in your full goddess while you're having somebody trying to puppeteer your life, because it was constructed that way in the simulation. That's not going to work. And so you go through this kind of interesting dance of sometimes you got to separate for a little bit, take your space. But then it goes deeper than that. It's because you came out of your mother's creational portal. The separation it only helps so much. Then there's a moon program. A lot of times these are lunar programs that are running. These are Saturn moon programs that are running, and like clockwork, on different moon cycles and things like that, or on different transits related to your birth chart, there's still going to be energies that might feel like spiritual attack or like weird spell work that's happening. And because you came out of your mother's like womb, like that's able to happen, because that's a very powerful generative force that you're dealing with. So it doesn't necessarily matter. I mean, it's helpful to have space, to take space for sure. But when you're getting into some of the more of the structural things in your world, you will become your own weaver. You will weave your own web. And this is the power of this is like the extent of being a god in the matrix, being a weaver. Because the matrix is a constructed reality or system. So let's think about a spider's web. A spider creates structure through their web that they weave. This cosmic web, and we can see this in the frequencies of things like Neith, goddess Neith, which we'll talk about a little later, grandmother spider as well. Other sort of weaving energies, Athena is another one. But here's the thing, they are creating structure. The Partheogenic goddess is pre-creational. They can go into where there is no structure, where things have not been created, and then bring things in. But you are now interrupting your biological mother's web when you do that. Okay, because another thing is like they're also now weaving their web through you. And this is how a lot of times different like karmic routing programs are happening. But you're not wanting to be a part of that anymore. But think about how a web is constructed. It has all of these different interconnected parts. So imagine yourself like enmeshed in a web. Okay, that's also something that happens a lot of times, is it not, with karmic mothers? Don't they even call it enmeshment? They're talking about a web. So when you're in a web, right, and you are getting yourself out of the web, it's not like you can just make a clean break from that web and then the rest of the web is perfectly intact. More likely than not, when you disassemble yourself from that web, you're messing up other aspects of the web. Now, it's a domino effect. This is because we are cosmically connected. So when you look at it that way, you could see why that would seem like an attack. Like from your karmic mother's perspective, you're messing up her life too. You're messing up what she's created. You're disrespecting her creations. So it's a tangled web that we weave. But the idea, though, if you are moving into that frequency of remembering your Partheogenic codes, being your own creatrix, you would still be working through removing yourself from that particular web so that you could bring in primordial codes that don't exist within the current matrix. But it becomes a rank and hierarchy issue. Even when we're talking about the feminine, a lot of times I've discussed like the rank and hierarchy being more of like a masculine 1 frequency. But there's also a rank and hierarchy that you move through with the karmic mother as well to navigate. And this might sound so terrible. I actually did a whole download on this. We've been moving through a lot of these energies on Patreon. And a couple months ago, I did a download on this around this concept of outranking the karmic mother program. Because if you are like serious about being your own creatrix, creating your own world, which a lot of times means weaving your own web, there does become this Game of Thrones, this weird hierarchical thing that goes on, even with your mother. And it might sound so absurd. Like, what are you talking about? Outranking your mother? Like, what? Well, that's what the Matrix wants you to think. But if you're carrying Partheogenic codes and this idea of remembering a time when you were seeding your creations and you weren't just a breeding female constructing a reality or system, well, you outrank the karmic mother. There is a rank and hierarchy. The creatrix outranks the matrix. But what you're having a lot right now is that we're going to discuss in a little bit more depth today. And this is something that I was peeping a lot in other realms, specifically as it relates to this Neith program, which we're going to get into. So Neith is let's just talk about Neith real quick, actually. Let's just bring her out into the surface. Neith is an Egyptian creator goddess who's known as being partheogenic. So she seeded herself from herself. And she's known as being the ultimate creator goddess. But peep this, Neith is the goddess of weaving. So we're getting spider energy with that. It's a similar kind of Athena energy with that. She's the goddess of weaving. She's the goddess of love. Or I don't know if love as much as war. Weaving, war, maybe love and creation. She's also associated with the frequency of the bee. So we got she has like 2 insects. So peep that. A partheogenic goddess, basically one of the only ones they talk about outside of Amunet, which is another frequency of Neith. This partheogenic goddess has 2 insect animal totems. So that's also showing you the rank of insects and what we can learn from insects as it relates to the building of structures. She's, there's the bee with her, which is the hive, which connects also with hive mind. But there's also the spider, the web, weaving. This is the ability to tell stories, to create matter, to bring things into form. It starts in the realm of story. Neith is in charge of that, but it's also warfare. This is also the frequency of how war is created. And how love becomes a tool for warfare. Now, Neith might be less distorted than some other goddesses because she's at least able to see creation through her own means. And yet this is a very imperial frequency as well. It's a very imperial frequency. So I actually want to discuss another etymology of creation that I just learned about today. But it makes all the sense in the world. So I mentioned that the etymology of creation is to cause, to grow, increase, crescendo, to make, to produce. But here's another thing that creation means. It also can mean to appoint or elect someone to an office. Yo, I didn't know that. That's deep. I didn't know that creation was political like that. So it changes things with Neith, goddess Neith being also the goddess of creation. It's also an imperial frequency of who's able to have power and who's not. And this brings me to one of her most well-known stories. Neith was the goddess who interceded between the epic battle between Heru and Set and Osiris and all that. So when there was that battle for who was going to wear the crown, who was going to be in power, it was Neith who made the final decision. She was known as being the ultimate mother goddess, the ultimate creator goddess. So when everybody was fighting and they couldn't come up with a solution, they went to Goddess Neith, and she made the final decision. And it makes sense because creation also means to appoint or elect someone to an office. Now, we're going to talk about this in a little bit more depth, but I'm going to share a little bit about what my experiences have been navigating the frequencies of Neith. I've been knowing that this is a frequency that I've been, that was important for me to integrate, but I had so many struggles with this. Actually, one of the first downloads I ever did on the Goddess Keys, I don't know, maybe somebody out there remembers. One of the first downloads I did on the Goddess Keys was on Goddess Neith, and got a lot of traction with that one. I had ended up taking it down because I was looking into the energies of Neith, and I'm like, something's really distorted here. And I got into this energy of like, I'm not going to, this is when I was going more into like spirituality, but more literally. And I was in my ascension sort of thing. I was like, okay, I don't want to be energy harvested from all of these false gods. I'd rather just work on cultivating myself. Okay. But then I got into an energy and I started to realize, okay, a lot of this stuff is simulated. So a lot of times these archetypes, these goddesses, these gods that they give us, they're storylines, they're archetypes that are already scripted or that they're already being played out anyway. So I might as well know what these archetypes are and integrate them. But that's when I went more into things as like simulation theory, or this concept of being a game maker in the matrix in order to create myself out of it or transcend it. So anyway, I ended up taking this particular download down, but a lot of people were attracted to my channel through this download related to Goddess Neith, as well as some other goddesses. I think I did one on Inanna like a long time ago as well, and some other goddesses as well. So I went through different phases, but there was something really like karmic that I was feeling with the Neith archetype. And so I love this concept of the Partheogenic goddess. I love this idea of, oh, wow, somebody who seeds, and I always knew I had these frequencies, somebody who brings things into form. And knows how to transcend the boundaries of space and time to do that, and doesn't necessarily need to be with like a twin flame or a partner to make that happen. I knew intuitively that that was more of a fallen, sort of fragmented, divided state. And I was really clear on my awakening path to move into those energies back into the Partheogenic frequency. I was kind of nervous to say it though, because it seemed like really pie in the sky, you know? But, you know, as your consciousness starts, as you start remembering things, as you start expanding in your consciousness, then you realize like, oh yeah, this is something that I have access to. So I'm talking about partheogenesis a lot more openly now, and more folks are going to be doing this too. More people are going to be remembering these codes, and they're going to get out of these like weird genetic capping programs, these weird DNA capping programs. And DNA itself is a construct. This is just for entertainment purposes only. But that's something I went through a lot of energies related to what is the nature of DNA. And it's a construct. It's a creation of the matrix itself. It's not a part of the Partheogenic creation codes. It was something that was created to keep people in the matrix, in the constructed reality or system. But it's not who we are. So, you know, where we would go to those source creational codes would be more within a black hole frequency, where there aren't things that have been constructed. You're bringing things in from quote unquote nothingness or nothingness, and you're bringing it in. And more of us are going to become adept at doing this. And this is how we're going to start seeing major shifts happening in the cosmos. When we do this, we're going to start seeing major shifts happening in the way we see reality, in the way we see time, and what we see or think as being possible. This is why the sun is setting on this karmic mother program. It must, because it will be our entrapment if we don't, if we just tiptoe around the mother, as karmic as the frequency can be, but we tiptoe around it because it's like, well, but that's the mother though, you know. No, it's based upon, a lot of times that the mother frequency is based upon a falsehood, and it's based upon blocking creation, blocking increase, blocking things to grow, blocking the ability to bring in new energies. And that can even mean who is appointed or elected into an office. And this isn't even talking about politics, but it's just like, who is able to lead? A lot of times this is being decided by a mother frequency. We want to think that the patriarchy is doing everything, but that's actually a cover. That's actually a cover. There's more of a mother frequency that, or so it seems. It also comes off a little androgynous, neither fully feminine, fully masculine, because there is an energy of partheogenesis that you get into with this mother frequency, but there's still a gatekeeping that happens at a certain stage, which really means that there's a state of division or forgetfulness even there. But we can see this play out in more of the day-to-day with the karmic mother program. You see how prevalent this is. More and more people are talking about it. As within, so without. Where did this come from? This dynamic came from another realm. More of us are going to be peeping this, and we're going to be interacting with these particular principalities, the hidden ones. That's another thing. Amun, Amunet. These are frequencies. Amunet's kind of weird. So that's one of my pen names, Amunet. I thought I completely retired it, but it came back in a weird way, like with a vengeance. So I just went with it, you know. I'm not just a one anything sort of person, so, or being. So I'm not just going to stay in my lane, even with a name as well. Even before I even had a choice, I had two names. It's a long story, but it's just always been like that. I've never been able to just keep things like in one particular lane. It's always been really messy with me, and it's because I'm more multidimensional. It's just how I roll. And so even with, when I wasn't trying to be multidimensional, it was just showing up like that in my reality in very strange ways. So anyways, Amunet means the hidden one. And so Amunet is another frequency of Neith. But she's kind of interesting because she kind of saw the introduction of the patriarchy. And there are even statues. So she's also known as being a Partheogenic goddess. And I knew that I wanted a name that brought me back to partheogenesis, that reminded me of partheogenesis. I also really liked I also wanted a name that started with a last name that started with A. So Amunet was cool. Even though she was also tied with Amun, but that was also a part of my story, being tied with certain solar priesthoods. Amun's known as being like a solar deity as well. And they're both considered to be the hidden ones. They're hidden behind what is formed. So I was also connecting to that hidden one frequency, that hidden mother frequency. And Amunet went through some interesting sort of evolutions with the way she was portrayed. There was even a time when Amunet had statues where she had a phallus. And when I first saw that, I was like, that's weird. Like, why do they have to give her a phallus in order to prove that she's partheogenic? Like, why does she need a phallus in order to prove that? That's what I thought at the time, but moving later on into the energies and how creation has been gatekept in the matrix and in the simulation, it makes sense why she had a phallus. You know, they were wanting to articulate that she was still able to bring things into the matrix. And there got to be a certain time in consciousness where she could only, that could only be through a phallus. She would need to have those, you know, different parts. Okay. So, yeah, so that's always been like a little interesting about her as well. And then she got connected with Amun. Then she started having a consort with Amun, so she didn't need the phallus anymore, apparently. Okay, and then got really distorted in a lot of ways. I actually visited her statue when I was in Egypt a couple of years ago, and she has a statue where her nose is completely demolished. She has no nose. And what's interesting about that, you know, this happened a lot for a lot of ancient Egyptian statues. You know, there are different theories around why this happened, but a lot of beings, a lot of statues got destroyed or their noses got taken off. And so her statue was one of them. It was very much dismembered. But an interesting thing about the nose is that it's very connected with the heart. So it's also symbolic, like the nose being taken off. And the Egyptians knew exactly what was going on with the heart. They knew the technology of the heart as well. And they were very refined in the sciences. So they knew about the connection with the nose and the heart. So I believe that the taking off or the destruction of a lot of the Egyptian statues and the noses was also a symbolism of something happening with the heart, a cutting off of the technology of the heart. And a lot of that happened also through breeding, through the breeding programs that they introduced on this planet. It did something to take away from the technology of the heart, the full capacities of the heart. And that's why we started getting into these weird twin flame programs as well, where it was like we got really codependent, and it's like we can't bring anything into this matrix unless we have a partner to do it. Okay, that was like from a state of division as well. So Amunet's an interesting sort of character, and I guess that's why I gravitated to that particular name, because as I was going through a process of reverse engineering and going back into time and seeing where the division happened from this Partheogenic frequency, because there's a lot of beings who are waking up to their goddesshood, but it's really you are getting in touch with those Partheogenic codes. The ability to be self-seeding, which expands your world and expands the world of the collective as well. We need more of that right now. It's a requirement for the frequencies that we're moving into. So this is why the sun must set on the karmic mother. And we're going to speak in the language in which the matrix understands, which is rank and hierarchy. The Partheogenic goddess outranks the karmic mother. The Creatrix outranks the matrix. So what does this mean? If you are resonating with the frequential bandwidth of partheogenesis, this ability to seed creation through yourself, through the black hole energy that transcends the ordered cosmos. We want to think of the cosmos as being the be-all, end-all, or the apex. But that's just the boundary. It's actually just the cosmos just shows us, or the stars just shows us what the boundary is. But there's way more black hole darkness sort of energy than there are stars. And more of us are going to be going into that darkness because that's where creation takes place. It's hard to create on top of order. It's a way more effective thing to actually find space to create and then bring things in that way. Some beings know how to do this, and they don't want to share that with other people. They don't want other people to know that. Hence why the Karmic Mother program. But the Partheogenic goddess outranks the Karmic Mother. So if you're connecting with your Partheogenic codes, This is why the karmic mother program comes so hard for you, is because they know that you're trying to outrank them. That's a problem, for them, because it's like, look, I got my whole web set up here. I'm the weaver in this family. You're trying to, ruin my web and go and do some other stuff. And you're taking your energy with you. You're taking your Partheogenic creation codes with you. Oh, hell to the no. And it's not about inciting warfare on mothers or having feminines go against each other, because how many times has that happened in the simulation, right? The women or the feminine are thrust upon each other to fight each other, to divide each other. And a lot of times this is happening through patriarchal forces. So it's like very messy. I'm not saying that this is like cut and dry, and I'm not saying that this is the most comfortable conversation, but it's necessary. It's something we will be talking more about. So this message is for anyone out there who sees themselves as a mother. My question to you, have you allowed space? Have you cultivated space for things to grow around you? Any being who is your offspring or who you consider yourself to be a mother to, do you give them space to grow, to increase? Or do you get threatened by that? And do you try to cut them off? Because if you're getting threatened by creation, that's some little girl shit. I don't care if you're 90 years old. That's some divided little girl shit, and you will be treated as such. You will not gatekeep the Partheogenic Creatrix. That stuff comes to an end. I don't care how old you are in the simulation. You're acting like a little girl. And you're hurting yourself too. Because really what you're doing is you're peeping the codes of the Partheogenic goddess. You're seeing, maybe that's your daughter. Maybe that's your younger sister. Maybe that's your older sister. Maybe that's your aunt. Maybe that's your cousin. And you see that they are in their goddesshood, or they're at least trying to remember it. They're trying to grow and they're trying to expand. And you're too afraid to. You're too caught up in the system. You're too caught up in the constructed reality and keeping things status quo. And you're cutting them off. And you're hating on them. Or you're throwing spell work on them. Or you're doing things to make sure that they get overlooked. Or you're gossiping about them. Whatever you can to make sure they don't increase. To make sure they don't grow, right? But they outrank you. They're remembering their Partheogenic codes. You want to as well. You're too afraid, or you don't think it's possible. So you're sure as hell not going to let anybody else do it, are you? That comes to an end. So if you are somebody who is carrying Partheogenic codes, I know it's difficult because you don't want to war with your mother. You don't want to war with the feminine. You want more wholeness. You want to cultivate more of a state of wholeness. You don't want to cultivate more of a state of division. And it could seem not super sound, right? To go to war with your mother or any feminine figure in your family, your grandmother, your great-grandmother. And at the same time, you're aligning yourself with the primordial creatrix. So you are honoring goddesshood in its most purest form. That's what virginity is. It's the ability to seed from yourself. That's what purity is. But any being who's getting in the way of that, you will get to a point where you'll need to remember, okay, but I outrank them. It could sound really, off-putting to say it like that, but this is matrix talk here. This is the constructed reality. The system created this, the rank and the hierarchy. So sometimes you got to speak the language. Doesn't mean you have to agree with it, but you want to be fluent in the language so you can get by and know how these things are done. So we're going to get into some biblical quotes real quick. Let's just see or not biblical. I have one thing from Genesis, one thing from the Quran, and one thing from the Talmud. Because in the last conversation, the last live I did, I made sure to really break down how the part of the hidden curriculum of the simulation is the big three religions, which we call Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. Do I agree? I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying I peep what the code is. So Christianity would be more of the right-hand path. That would be more of your masculine. Then you have Islam, which is more like the left-hand path. That would be more of the feminine. And you can see this in the way that things are done. Also, you have like Christianity is ruled by the sun. Islam's more, by the moon. You can see this in the iconography of the religions. And then Judaism is the merging of the opposites. It's the mixture of both. You have the upward-facing triangle and the downward-facing triangle coming together. You have the higher self and the lower self coming together. So this is what the priesthoods, they divided a whole bunch of stuff, a whole bunch of secrets in these big three religions. And for beings who are able to merge the opposites, who are able to merge their upward-facing triangle and their downward-facing triangle, their right side, their left side, their inner sun, their inner moon, they achieve more mastery. They're able to move more omnidirectionally and freely on and off of the game board. But if you're too caught up in a state of division, or you're more caught up in your masculine, or you're more caught up in your feminine, your right-hand path versus your left-hand path, or what is it, your sun versus your moon, then it keeps you in a state of division and it keeps you from evolving. And that's why they designed the religions the way they did. So that being said, I like to bring in some of these materials from these big three religions. I made an announcement earlier this year that I'm becoming the priesthood. And when I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. That's one thing. That's my Capricorn coming out. Okay, I made an announcement. I said I'm becoming the priesthood. I even got myself became an ordained minister and everything. And, because I realized that if I didn't, I was going to be gate-kept out of certain things that were sourced and originated from me anyway. So I played ball. Sometimes you're going to have to play ball. So we're going to start with the Quran. So Quran 53, 19 through 23. So I mentioned that Islam is more feminine. And so some people might be like, what are you talking about? It's super patriarchal. You have the Prophet Muhammad, and then the Quran. It seems to be very much about prioritizing the man, prioritizing the patriarchy, more of an oppression of the women. But there's a mystery related to the Quran, because before there was Allah, there was Allat. Allah used to be Allat or El-Lat. E-L-L-A-T. El-Lat or Allat was a feminine goddess. You notice how the burqas, you see the burqas, the black burqas, a lot of beings might say, especially if you're on the West, you might see that and be like, oh my gosh, how oppressive. They got to wear that and it's super hot outside and this, and they can't even show their face and this and that. You're only looking at it from a limited perspective. They're the black hole. They're representing the black hole. It's actually really powerful. They're actually like a womb, a walking womb with that energy. It's actually, in another perspective, it's kind of sexual. That's what's funny about it. But you have to look at things from another angle. If you look at things too much from the right side, or like the right hand path, the sun or the one, then you miss the mysteries, because Islam operates more from the zero, and it operates more from like that dark feminine, and then there's like also mysteries related to it. So in this Quran verse, they say, have you considered Alat and Al-Uzza and Manat, the third and the other one? Are you to have the males and he the females? That then is an unfair division. These are nothing but names which you have named, you and your forefathers, from which Allah has sent down no authority. So it's interesting. As they talk about the primordial feminine gods of, or goddesses of Islam, or before Islam, this is before Islam, they also, in the same verse, they cut them down and say like, well, they don't matter because Allah is the one with the authority. And so one way you could read this is, oh, yeah, well, here we go. Here's another way in which the feminine got distorted or got cut down or got divided by the patriarchy. That's a little simplistic. If we look at things from more of like a decoding thing, a lot of times these biblical or these religious texts, they will uplift a being that they write about and then cut them down right after. It's like a way for them to keep balance. Okay. So just because they got cut down, that's, I think, the only quote in which they're mentioned in the whole Quran. But they were mentioned. Okay. They were mentioned, and they were before the Quran. They were before Islam. And you can still find a lot of their influences and a lot of their mysteries in the way things are conducted in Islam. And, you know, I've spent some time in Muslim countries living a couple times in my life. And so I've had a chance to observe and look at the culture firsthand. And I'm not saying that things are perfect with the feminine in the Arab countries, as they're certainly not feminine in the Western countries either. I mean, they're not perfect over here either. But I will say the women are very strong. They're very strong. They're very powerful. Very powerful. Very authoritative. I never got a weak vibe from Arab women in my life, actually. They're very strong. Very, very strong and powerful. So, just be careful, like, with what you experience when you are watching news and stuff like that. Like, have you had the experiences? Have you been in these particular cultures? Or are you just regurgitating what you hear other people say, or like from hearsay? Because you might get a completely different perspective. So that's like one of the time when the feminine is mentioned in the Quran. It's not very often, they didn't really put a lot in there. The way the religions were created wasn't really to uplift the feminine, as we know. So then I was looking for energies related to the mother in the Talmud, the Jewish text, or one of the Jewish texts. A lot of interesting quotes that they have as it relates to the developing of the fetus and stuff like that. But I just chose a quote. This is from Kiddushin 31b, which is basically talking about the mother and father are both owed honor and reverence. I think across all of the texts, they talk about honoring the mother and honoring the father. Okay, so, and that's something like to note. That is, like, if you don't honor your mother, like if you have a negative viewpoint of your mother, yeah, it can mess up your life. No matter what she's doing to you, because of the ordering of things, because of the ordering of the matrix. So it's not about disrespecting the mother, but it's also thinking about what we are considering. Are we making motherhood synonymous with creation? Because mother kind of is actually, let's look at the etymology of mother. Mother means origin, source, generator, nurturer, or formative environment. So yeah, your mother is your origin and your source until you activate your partheogenic codes. Then you're transcending the matrix or the matrix, and then your origin and your source changes. And then your honor and your allegiance changes. So it's not just about just saying, screw it, I disrespect my source now because I want to outrank my source. No. When you're in the matrix, when you're in that particular simulated sort of frequency, many times you'll be in a karmic mother program. You may not be aware of it. When you start activating your consciousness and activating your partheogenic codes, your goddess codes, your creatrix codes, it's going to be glaringly obvious to you about the karmic mother program. It's not to speak ill of your biological mother or your birth mother, but it's the structure that you guys are in. It's the web work that y'all are in. Your mother changes at that point because now you're connecting with your pre-creational codes before the matrix, before the constructed reality or system. This is where we get into like game maker sort of territory. So yeah, while you're in the matrix, while you're following the rules of the matrix, yeah, honor your mother, honor your birth mother. You know, like, hey, they might get on your nerves. They might do things that kind of piss you off, or yeah, they might kind of try to sabotage you a little bit or talk down to you a little bit, but you put up with it because, you know, you honor your mother, like in the simulation. Yeah, you do. But then what happens when you are tapping into pre-creational codes and you are getting into your goddesshood? Then things start changing. And your concept of what a mother is starts changing as well. And then the mother, your biological mother, starts looking a lot more like a gatekeeper sort of frequency, warden sort of frequency. And then it's time to transcend that and go before the time. Because remember, matrix has to do with breeding females. Well, you're tapping into a frequency before that was how creation was made, was through breeding. So then rank changes, okay? So this is kind of how we contextualize this. We don't just disrespect the creational force, but you get to a certain point where you're looking at the karmic mother program, and here you are connecting, you know, you're working on connecting with your partheogenic codes, your ability to grow, to increase, to produce. And then that karmic mother is standing in the way of you doing it. They are disrespecting motherhood at that point. They are disrespecting creation at that point. And when that happens, then they are outranked because they forgot their source. They forgot their origin. That's the frequency. This is why the sun is setting on the karmic mother program. It's not enough to just expect to be honored because you gave birth to somebody. Are you honoring creation? Or are you trying to gatekeep it? Because at that point, you're not even in your goddess. So now you get outranked. That's how that works. That's how that goes down. It doesn't matter how old you are. It has nothing to do with that. It's a frequency. It's a mindset. It's a vibration. So now we're going to get into some of the frequencies of one of my books, The 50 Shades of Marduk. We're going to get into the energies of what they call the Whore of Babylon archetype. We're going to get into that. And I'm not going to talk about the Whore of Babylon the way a lot of people do. A lot of people will focus on the whore part and degrade that, okay? There's a reason why they call prostitution as the oldest profession. Okay, I don't see anything degrading about a prostitute or a sacred whore or anything like that. So I put this Whore Babylon archetype loosely. It's not here to degrade that frequency at all. So it says the Whore Babylon archetype symbolizes a system in which the feminine becomes entangled in a system that venerates an external masculine authority. In these dynamics, the feminine energy becomes aligned with the maintenance of the system rather than its transformation. In this configuration, the feminine force participates in the continuation of the system, even when the system itself is predatory or extractive. The feminine becomes a channel in which the system perpetuates itself. The archetype of Babylon then functions as a symbol of seduction into the spectacle of power. It's not merely about sexuality or decadence. It is about the ways in which systems attract participation through glamour, wealth, and symbolic authority. So this is the Karmic Mother program. As I was going into the energies of Marduk, the 50 emanations of Marduk, I had a whole idea around what Marduk was. I saw this as being the overbearing patriarch, the one that slayed the feminine. Everything's Marduk's fault. We just need to get rid of Marduk or reclaim our power from these patriarchs and we'll be good. No. I got a rude awakening with that when I started going into the energies of Marduk. And the more I went into the frequencies of Marduk, the more the finger pointed back towards the feminine. I was like, what? And I didn't want to believe it. Because then it's like, okay, well, now I'm looking like a hater on women. It's like, okay, well, but it was a rude awakening. The more I studied Marduk, and this is another secret of the priesthood. When you become the priesthood, you realize who holds and wields the real power. And it goes back to the feminine. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. There might be a front. There might be a display of the masculine authority. But that authority can only be in power with a certain feminine backing. And we hear murmurings about this, even with certain politicians, how they have covens supporting them. That's the natural order of the matrix, the matrix. Yeah, so as I started studying Marduk and I got more into these initiated secrets of the priesthood, I'm like, oh, there's a feminine force behind all this. Okay, it's not just that the feminine got taken off of her throne, taken out of her power, and she's cowering somewhere as a little victim. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. No, it doesn't go down like that. A lot of things don't go down on this planet without the co-signing of a feminine force. This is when we get into the frequencies of what kind of, where are we sourcing consciousness from as it relates to creation? Is it to preserve the matrix? Or is it to get in touch with the self-seeding codes, the pre-creational codes? Because just because you have more of a feminine energy, it doesn't mean you have the same way of seeing the organization or the structure of reality. It's kind of like a whole, like how they talk about not all skin folk are kinfolk. It's kind of like that, but more like a feminine frequency. It's not popular, but it's what I learned. I wasn't happy when I learned it, but it's something I learned. So now we're going to get into one of the names of Marduk, which is Asaluhi. This is from the 50 Shades of Marduk. This is the fourth name of Marduk. And this is known as the Master of Hidden Forces. So as I was writing this book and getting through all of these 50 emanations, I was getting images channeled to me around what they represent. And even though all of the names of Marduk usually are referred to as he, when I got to this fourth emanation of Marduk, and many others actually, I saw a feminine energy. So for Asaluhi, in the book, there's like a picture. I put 3 women, 3 veiled women wearing all black, their faces veiled, kind of more of a lunar frequency. So it says, in ancient Mesopotamian tradition, Asaluhi was known as a healer, magician, and mediator between worlds. When disorder entered the system, whether through illness, conflict, or spiritual disruption, it was Asaluhi who understood how to restore balance by working with the forces that others could not perceive. Throughout ancient traditions, the forces that govern fertility, transformation, protection, and spiritual intervention were often carried through matriarchal lineages of power. These forces existed beneath formal political authority and often operated outside visible systems of governance. They were not always named directly, but they were known to those who understood the deeper structure of the world. The priesthood, they're known by the priesthood. They're not going to be known by the lay people. They don't deal with the lay people. The best way you can describe this sort of frequency is if you have a corporation, right? You have the beings that work at the corporation. Then you have the board of directors. Then you have the beings that manage the board of directors. That's what we're talking about. That's the sort of power we're talking about. They're not just going to come on the scene like that just for anybody. Within the Yoruba cosmology of West Africa, these forces are referred to as the mothers, often called the Iyamiaje, meaning our mothers. They represent primordial feminine intelligences connected to the earth, the night, the womb of creation, and the unseen networks through which destiny unfolds. So this goes back to the energies of Neith as well. The energies of Neith. So now I want to talk a little bit about just what my experiences have been with the frequencies of Neith. So I started off talking about how I knew that this was an archetype to integrate, but I started to feel that there was like a karmic storyline related to Neith. So then I kind of like stopped messing with that energy, but it kept coming back. It kept coming back. I started to also connect this frequency to some kind of a hive sort of intelligence as well. That's one of the other frequencies that I uncovered in the book, The 50 Shades of Marduk. That's the second name of Marduk, known as Maruka. It's more of a hive intelligence. Queen bee hive sort of intelligence. And Neith does represent the hive. Okay, she that's one of her totems is the bee. She has the temple of the bee as well. That's kind of more of a royal frequency as well. That guides and stewards collective consciousness as well. So I started to peep that, and then I started to see that, I realized I got to a certain point, and a lot of people who have 22 degrees in their birth chart, you're gonna contend with hive frequencies. You're gonna go back to the hive. And you get to a certain point in your consciousness, especially as you're activating your crown, where you're going to be retrieving your consciousness from hive mind dynamics. If you'll get to a certain point where if you don't do this, then those energies will always like cap you off. They'll always kind of cut you off and say, actually, no, you can't go any further. No, you can't evolve anymore. Stay here. And this is where you get into like the hive dynamics. This is why sometimes like when you start waking up out of the simulation and you're like working on growing your consciousness, it seems as though you get cut off sometimes by like the hive mind. This is that sort of frequency. So I was encountering that and I wasn't feeling it. Okay. And it had a lot to do with also maritime sort of energies as well. So I was moving through that. There's a lot of weird scripts going on related to that. A lot of weird royalty scripts related to that as well. So I was moving through those energies. Once I got through a lot of the hive energies, then the archetype of Neith, this Partheogenic goddess, started coming back to me. And at first it felt elusive to hold on to the frequency of a Partheogenic goddess. There's a certain restoration that you go through to even be able to contemplate this or to see yourself in this. Sometimes it's hard, especially if you're going through scripts related to genetic engineering or breeding programs, and if this is playing out in your world, sometimes it's hard to hold that frequency of the Partheogenic goddess during those particular times. But you get to a certain point in your consciousness retrieval where you're able to hold that capacity. And that's when I started, working on connecting with the frequencies of Neath. I saw that there were a lot of distortions. And this brought me to the frequencies of East Africa, actually. I talked a little bit about my experiences in Ethiopia about like over a year and a half ago. And I go into a lot more on Patreon, but there were some really strong feminine creational portals that I was connecting with when I was out there. But then I was also connecting to these very strong gatekeeper frequencies related to them as well. And at first I thought it was more patriarchal, but I started to connect more with like a matriarchal kind of gatekeeping energy that I was a little confused about or surprised by. And this brings us to the frequencies of like the dollar bill as well, because when we look at that pyramid on the dollar bill, we just automatically assume that pyramid is an Egyptian pyramid, but it's not. If you look at the pyramid on the dollar bill, it's a little skinnier. It's more of a Nubian frequency, a Nubian pyramid frequency. And, if you go into, I started researching this maybe 2 years ago. It's harder to find this information now. They've kind of done more of a scrub with this information now. But I was able to trace the pyramid back to a particular goddess, East African goddess, I believe a Nubian goddess known, they're called the Kandake, the Candaces of Meroe or Meroe. This is more of a frequency of like the Sudan area. But that particular pyramid on the dollar bill connects back to a Nubian queen. And the way the legend goes is that her tomb was raided, her pyramid was raided by an Italian dude. And somehow, some way, that particular tomb or pyramid ended up on the dollar bill. So I always kind of thought like, oh, okay, yeah. So the patriarchy took over. The patriarchy took over, and then they energy harvested the feminine. And then they put that pyramid on the dollar bill as like a sign of energy harvesting, So I just kind of thought like that, oh, poor Candaces, poor queens, they got fallen, their tombs got raided, or so the story would maybe want you to think. But when you really start getting into that all-seeing eye frequency, and you're able to hold the frequency, you're able to see the powers behind it. And they stop looking masculine. And then it takes on a whole ass other connotation around why that particular pyramid is on the dollar bill. Yep. And I didn't want to believe this, y'all. I'm not trying to, doubt the feminine. I did many readings and many meditations. You don't know how much I wanted to believe. Like, yeah, the queens were fallen, but they used to be in power, and one day we're gonna take everything back. What do they say? Take back the night or whatever. No, absolutely not. Things are organized the way they wanted them to be organized. There's a feminine force behind the priesthood. They refer to this. You can call them the Iamis. You can also call them in Sumeria. They refer to them more as the Apkallu, and they look more masculine. The Apkallu look more masculine, but they would actually be a little bit more gender non-conforming. The Apkallu, they are they're known as being the assistants to the gods. Okay, like they're the intermediaries between the gods. They're also the ones that decide like what gets taught to humanity, but they're like outside of humanity too, but they're like the intermediary, like talking piece sort of thing. And usually they're depicted more as masculine, and you can either see them as like having fish heads. They're like humanoid, and then they have like a fish head, like a fish hat almost, which is kind of similar to how you see like the priesthoods, like, you know, the Pope and all that. But then there's also the Apkallu that have the bird heads as well. And Iami Age is very connected to the birds as well. Okay, and it's an air frequency. You know, you have to meet a certain frequency to reach the frequency of air. This goes back to the energy of before there was Allah, there was Alat or El Lot. This also comes into the frequencies of El, storm god El. What if El isn't masculine? There's also the frequency known as El Lyon. EL-LYON, El Lyon. When I finally tapped into those frequencies, they were feminine. It was all divine feminine. But the way that they're going to describe El Lyon, if you were to search El Lyon on any sort of platform, it would be more of a male storm god frequency. But if you, I ask you, just tap into the energies yourself and see what you find. You might see something a little bit more feminine. And I don't even know if it's just feminine. I think it's more androgynous than anything else. But the way I'm seeing it is that it does have a distinct divine feminine, almost like a partheogenic sort of frequency. Okay. And then, of course, you have the energies of Namu. I talked more about Namu in the last download. Namu is the Partheogenic goddess before Tiamat that did not make it into the Enuma Elish. She was omitted from the Enuma Elish. She's more of a reptilian sort of deity. And she was known to be a Partheogenic goddess that seeded the Anunnaki, but she got written out of the Enuma Elish. Okay. So there's that as well. Neith is a little bit more of a reboot after that Namu frequency. I mean, a lot of time went past between the times prior to the Enuma Elish and then the times when Egypt came on the scene, and then the goddess Neith was written about and documented. So a lot of time passed in between with that as well. So anyway, I was going through these particular frequencies, and as I was recapitulating myself, remembering my own ancient codes, I finally felt ready to hold the frequency of Neith in meditation. And it was like after I got through a lot of hive mind energies, I went through a lot of Kabbalah energies. I had to neutralize a lot of Kabbalah energies. I had to neutralize a lot of energies at the 22nd degree and the 27th degree. The 22nd dimension and the 27th dimension. So those are 2 dimensions to look at, or 2 degrees to look at, 22 and 27. 27 is more of the Apkallu sort of energies. 22 is going to be more of your hive sort of frequencies. So lo and behold, I go into meditation, and I connect with what I thought was the energy of Neith, but it was very counterfeit. This energy was very counterfeit. It was like somebody dressed up in a Neith costume. The way I saw this being was a Somali woman. For some reason, Somalia came in real strong. And I've been talking about the energies of Zubin el-Ganubi and Zubin el-Shamali. For those who were following my lives maybe 2-3 months ago. For those who haven't, let me do a recap on what Zubin el-Ganubi and Zubin el-Shamali is. Okay, so before the Babylonian overlay of the current astrological charts that we have, which now has Libra. Peep this, Libra is the measuring scale. You already know something's off about that. Of all of the astrological signs that we see on the current chart, It's the only tool. Libra is the only tool on there. And it's a measuring scale of all things. What does Libra represent? Libra represents relationships. I believe that this was an overlay specifically to accommodate for the breeding programs that got introduced on this planet. When it became, you must partner with somebody to create. You must. This is why you have the two measuring scales. This is why Libra is the ruler of relationships and contracts. But it's like, it's not just love. It's not just like, even though it is ruled by Venus, that's another thing to peep. Libra is ruled by Venus. And let's take it a step further. Venus has one moon. That moon is named Neith. So that moon is named after the Partheogenic goddess Neith, okay? And Libra is ruled by relationships, or rules over relationships, is ruled by Venus, which is the planet of love. And you have the two measuring scales. But it was not always like that. That's an overlay. Before the two measuring scales came on board with Libra, they were known as the claws of the scorpion. Subliminal Ganubi being one claw, Subliminal Shamali being another claw. It was a lot more primordial, kind of predatorial. So you have that clean little overlay of the measuring scales. But underneath that, you have these like claws of the scorpion. Now, if you look at the energies of the scorpion and the claws, it's very connected to the womb. It's very connected to the anatomy of the womb. And it shows the womb in its more chaotic, primordial force as well. Because there is an energy, a devouring, destroyer energy that the womb has. There's that technology too. They did a lot to overlay that and to make that not a thing because it's scary, right? For the beings who want to measure the womb, it would be scary to have those claws going off, right? So they overlaid Subliminal Ganubi and Subliminal Shamali with the measuring scales. Now we're going to take it to the grids. I talk a lot about the grids. Now we're getting into Saturn with this, okay? This is the way things are structured. So we look at the grid system, and I've done a lot to share this content on Black Diamond. The folks who are on Patreon Black Diamond are really connected with the land and the grid systems in very particular ways. Usually they are carrying particular like ancient Partheogenic codes. And so a lot of times their emanation is connected with the land in a lot of ways. Those are the beings who are usually attracted to the frequencies of Black Diamond on Patreon. And one project, I went through many projects this year as it related to mapping the body with the land. One of those things was I created an album called Earthbender and basically did a project as it related to tectonic plates and looking at the tectonic plates on the current map, even though I'm sure there are many, many other lands that are not documented on the world map. But hey, we got to go with what we got. Okay. So I was really trying to understand the world map and the different layers of the earth. Okay. Which you can find a lot of cool stuff out about. So anyways, I mapped out the tectonic plates in this Earthbender album, and really for some reason was always focused on East Africa. The Horn of Africa was just always just something. I'm like, something's popping off out there. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's reading in the tectonic plates as well. But if you even look at the etymology of tectonic, it's just a construct. It's not, when you're at tectonic plate level, you're still in the grids. It's just like what the grids are being manipulated to do. And if you zero in on the Horn of Africa, you have Nubia and Somalia right there. And you have the Nubian plate and you have the Somali plate right there. And they're rubbing against each other right now, causing a lot of friction and division. There's a very strong energy of divisiveness over there. Just in the tectonic plates alone. I'm not even talking about what's happening politically. I'm looking at what the land is saying. And this is why there are murmurings about the split that might be happening on the African continent in this particular region. There's too much division, there's too much tension going back and forth with the Nubian plate and the Somalian plate. Zubadan el Ganubi, Zubadan el Shamali. But I'm sure that's a coincidence, right? That's just a coincidence. Well, let's go a little bit further. Let's go deeper. Let's go deeper with this. So there is a part, let's talk about Punt. There is an ancient land known as Punt, P-U-N-T. It's known as being God's land. It was written about in Egyptian times. They talk about Hathor, Lady of the Crown, the Lady of Punt. There's rumors about Punt. Some people wonder, does it really exist? You know, it's kind of a mythical land. It's known as being big with a lot of riches and luxuries and all of that. You have different Egyptian pharaohs that have documented different frequencies related to going to the land of Punt. There's also an interesting dwarf frequency that you can find with the land of Punt. You get into the energies of the god, one of the Egyptian gods known as Bes. There's also connection, who's a dwarf god, also connected with the deity Ptah, who I've been talking about a lot as well. This is also connected with the land of Punt. But there's this overlay of mystery and magic. Like, did it exist? Where did it exist? Some people say it existed in Somalia. But whatever it is, it's known as being God's land, the land of the gods. Okay? They say, though, that Punt is somewhere around the Horn of Africa, which is a little interesting. So it's like, land of the gods, Zubadan el Ganubi, Zubadan el Shamali, which is more of a womb frequency. Even Libra is more of a womb frequency, even though it's more, when you get to the Libra overlay, you're dividing the womb into partners, like a contractual partnership, okay, in order to measure it. But of all things, wouldn't the womb be the most godlike frequency? Because it's the portal, it's like where life is created in the matrix. So yeah, Punt might just be around Somalia and Nubia, quite possibly, okay? But there's a problem going on, and we can see that happening in the tectonic plates. It's unstable, it's divisive, it's there's a lot of issues erupting over there just in the land readings alone. Let's not even talk about politics. That'll be for another day. But then there's also this weird frequency of a Nubian pyramid being on an American dollar bill. What's up with that? What's going on with that? Well, is that connected by any means? Interesting. So back to my experience with the bootleg Neith that I saw, because that was not Neith. And I did finally connect with the energies of Neith. It was a very rude Somalian woman dressed up as Neith, who was like very much gatekeeping these primordial Partheogenic codes. It was weird. It was very, very strange. And what was stranger is that it started to alert me to other themes that I had played out in my life with specifically feminine women in East Africa. I started having a retrospect. It never really occurred to me, but I started to, that frequency with Neith started to activate memories, because I've somehow been connected with East Africans from a very young age. Eritreans, I've known more Eritreans than Ethiopians, but yeah, Eritreans, Ethiopians, as well as Somalians. And each time as I was doing this retrospect, I was like, there was always a weird tension with them. But it was, I never paid attention to it because I didn't feel that. It's not like I was tense against them, but I was feeling this like weird adversarial energy with them towards me, or even our ancestors not connecting, like a weird thing. I went back to a really good friend of mine that I had from Eritrea when I was in my teens. And I don't know, something just happened where she just stopped talking to me one day. And it was like the weirdest thing. I'm like, I don't even know what I did to her to make her stop talking to me. It's just like, okay. And then even there was a weird connection where I met a friend all the way in Thailand when I lived in Thailand. And that friend ended up being friends with her from some very random turn of events. I met this girl. So the girl from Eritrea, that was when I was living in Los Angeles. Years later, I moved to Thailand. I have a roommate in Thailand. We keep in touch. She moves back to the States in a completely different state and ends up, I don't even know how I ended up finding out that they were friends in common. But I did. I'm like, oh, that was a friend I used to have. And it was still like a weird thing. Like even with that connection, there I don't know what happened, but there was some rift. But things happen with friends. So it's not like I held on to it. That was one of the montages I had. I'm like, okay, yeah, I did have that friend from Eritrea, and that kind of fell off. Okay, that was weird. And that happened a couple times with those friends. And then I always had this desire to go to Sudan. I even almost ended up working at a university there. I ended up getting a little too nervous. This was before I started really traveling. I was thinking about going to take a job in Khartoum in Sudan. Got cold feet at the last minute, didn't do it. But for some reason, I was really attracted to those Nubian pyramids. There was something about that frequency that I really was connecting with. Didn't end up doing that. Then when I started connecting more with Moorish sort of energies a few years ago, once again, I applied for a job. This one was a job in Somaliland, and it was to be a teacher at a school, at an all-girls school. And I was having this group interview. And to be honest, it was a very strange interview that I had with this Somalian woman. And it was like, I'm like, why is she so aggressive towards me? Like she did all this research, back end research on me. She found out I was a healer. She didn't like that. Like she was super religious or something like that. And she was giving me the third degree in the interview. It was very obvious that she didn't like me. And it was weird because the guy who was leading the interview, he was embarrassed because he was like, oh my gosh, she's a really good candidate. Because, not to brag or whatever, but I know I was probably even overqualified for that. But she was so weird towards me. She was I don't know, it was a threat for me to be there at that school. And so much to the fact where I was I don't even want to continue the interview process because I'm not feeling the vibes. It was giving those an Oprah Winfrey school. It was kind of that kind of energy too anyway. So I wasn't really feeling all that, but I just started having a montage of these different weird experiences that I had with specifically East African women. Even when I was in Ethiopia, I had a weird experience with an Airbnb host there, and I usually never have weird experiences. And then I was going back to a montage of when I first started becoming a sound healer. And this was probably the creepiest experience where, I'm a sound healer. And this is before I really understood ancestors and spirits. I didn't know I was doing working with necromancy and spirits. I thought I was just playing singing bowls. I was in my light worker phase. I didn't know I just thought I was doing sound healings. No, I was calling up a whole bunch of energies and stuff. I didn't realize it because I wasn't equipped. So that was my bad for not getting the full scoop, knowing how things went down. But anyway, ended up meeting this girl, another Eritrean girl, at a conference, more of a retreat. And we connected a lot, and we ended up doing a value exchange. She did a photo shoot for me, and then I did a sound healing for her. And it's the weirdest thing happened where I get to her house. First of all, weird stuff starts happening with the elevator. The doors are getting stuck and randomly opening. It was a spirit possession was happening. Then she ends up dropping and shattering my obsidian throat chakra singing bowl. I wasn't mad. I was just it's just a lot of weird freak accidents, But I was yeah, there's a weird interference. And she was feeling it too, that there was a spirit happening. So I go in, I'm putting together this sound healing thing. I got really freaked out. I went into her apartment. There were these two really big black wings in the living room, in her living. It was like, I was like in my light worker station. I'm like, why she got black wings like that? This is weird. This is weird. Like, what's going on? Like, so I was getting a little freaked out. Then I light some sage. Look, I've lit sage so many times. So many times. I lit some sage. The whole house started smoking. And then basically we set off the fire alarm. And she lives in a tall like she lives in one of those big sort of loft buildings. So the whole loft has to get evacuated because of some sage. Like weird shit. Like it was like very clear that there was a spirit there that did not want us to connect, did not want work to be done. Okay. But all of these things started coming back to me as I had this experience with Neith, this astral experience with this, and it wasn't Neith. It was a imposter spirit. It was an imposter spirit, but she was showing up as Somalian for some reason. Okay, she was showing up as Somalian. I don't know what was going on with that. But it was a very much of a gatekeeper. It was that same energy that I had been encountering. If I wasn't paying attention to it, but I put it all together with this Neith, bootleg Neith experience. I'm like, dang, this has been a common thing. Like, dang, like, do we have smoke, East African women? Well, literally we did, because I told you about the sage experience. Yeah, we did have smoke. Okay, that was the weirdest thing ever. Lit sage so many times. That never has happened in my life, but it happened there. Shattered, got a whole obsidian throat chakra bowl shattered. Like some weird shit was going down. Really, really weird stuff. Black angel wings in the mix. A whole bunch of weird stuff. So it just got me thinking of like, well, what is the source of this? What's going on? So I started doing some research on the connection with Somalia in America. And so I started looking at and I've been on this tip before and I stopped being on it, but it's bringing me back, this energy of the hidden history of the Americas. Because what I've been learning and what we've been talking about a lot on Patreon, and we're going to be going a little bit more into that, is how this Lionsgate portal, even though they talk about Lionsgate being something that takes place in the Giza pyramids in Egypt. Look, I've been to the Giza pyramids. That's Disneyland, okay? I don't care what anyone says. And it's an energy harvesting factory over there. That's not where the real pyramids are. That's not where original Egypt is. And I thought it was. I moved out there. I really did. And I had my ancestors just right next to me, like, this ain't real. This is not where you're from. This is not the original. But look, I'm not just saying this. I went and the land told me and the ancestors told me. I had to go, literally, I didn't find this out until I actually went to Africa. Then I was like, oh, and then I got walked through, what the overlay was. The original Egypt is in the Americas. It goes back to this. This is what it goes back to. And I don't just mean what is now known as the United States. I'm talking Central America, South America, and then aspects of the United States, most specifically the South. There's also a frequency too when you get into Nevada. What you got? Nevada, Mexico, Utah. Utah's a big one too. There's some Egypt vibes over there as well. But it goes back to those energies, because if we're talking about Partheogenic Creatrix codes, you would want to follow where the original civilizations were. But if you're getting another history about where original civilizations are, that could very well be an imposter overlay, but they're saying that's where the Partheogenic goddess was. But what if there was an energy prior to that? You could see how that could be a problem. And that was a theme when I was doing the retrospect after having this experience in, this astral experience with a imposter Neith sort of energy, it all started coming back to me. I'm like, yeah, there has been some weird kind of tension between me and East African women from jump for some reason. I didn't really understand because it wasn't coming from, I wasn't, I liked it. I thought that we had more in common than not, but every time I've connected in that particular frequency, it's always felt more divisive for some reason. And I couldn't fully get it. So I just put it out of my mind because it's like, well, I don't know what's going on. I'm not tripping off of it. But if you have an overlay of history that's saying, oh, no, the original civilizations were here, 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 but then that's just an overlay, that could be a problem. That could be a problem. So I started looking at specifically like Somalian immigration in the Americas, and I found some interesting stuff. So we have Minneapolis, Minnesota, and of course St. Paul, Minnesota, those twin cities. There's a very strong Somalian population there. What's interesting about this is that this is where the Great Lakes are. The Great Lakes are the largest freshwater bodies of water in the world. So I just found that a little interesting. Okay. Columbus, Ohio seems to have the strongest, one of the largest Somalian populations. And that's very close to where you can find vestiges of where maybe the more primordial or original Lion's Gate is, actually. There's even these interesting sort of like Sphinx statues that you can find in Columbus, Ohio. And then you have Serpent Mound over there. And, when you get into the energies of Neith and specifically Amunet, it goes back to the serpent as well. And then you have Seattle, Washington. That's a really big, that's a really strong tech area. You have San Diego, California. I was actually just recently there and had some really strong Somalian vibes while I was there that I found interesting. And then you have Louisville, Kentucky. These areas are very well resourced naturally. Almost like they could be possible candidates for where Punt is. Specifically, I'm thinking Ohio. Because Ohio is an interesting place because the name of Ohio, the tagline for Ohio is the heart of it all. The heart of it all. And I was peeping too, I do a lot of study, not so much these days, but I went through a really big period of study through television, just finding different archetypes in television. And one weird thing I was noticing with main female characters with a lot of the television shows or movies that I was coming across, they were from Ohio. It was weird. I'm like, why are all these women from Ohio? Why are they writing Ohio into the scripts of these women so much? It was like a jump off point. But, Ohio is known as being the heart of it all. And it also has that really big serpent mound sort of frequency, a very strong serpentine energy there. It's very fertile land. Very rich with river systems. And when you get into those energies, there's a strong inner earth current as well, a very strong subterranean current there. So I just think it's interesting that here I am finding out that there's more of an energy of Lion's Gate or the Sphinx or Egypt in the Americas. And isn't that kind of interesting that it just so happens that there's a strong, one of the top Somalian populations too in that same area? What's going on? What's up? I'm asking questions. I'm not here to have all the answers, but there's something we need to uncover about this. What is the connection with the Americas and Nubia and Somalia? Zubananel Ganubi, Zubananel Shamali. What's going on? It has to do with divine feminine primordial codes. If we don't get to the bottom of this history, what's going to happen, and I'm specifically talking to the creatrix goddesses that are indigenous to the Americas, you're going to be gate kept by these particular frequencies, these East African frequencies. And I'm not here, this is weird because I'm not here to be divisive, but there's an imprint of division, first of all, that's even in the grid systems when you get to the area of Somalia and Nubia. And I don't mean whatever the political situation is. I'm not privy to what's going on there. I'm talking about what the land, the architecture is doing with the tectonic plates. It's reading division. There's also a rumor, though, of a very strong feminine regal presence in this Horn of Africa. Question is, are they original? Who so I hate to say it like this. Where's the rank in it? Who's the primordial ones? I hate to say it like this, but look, I'm just following the current. I'm trying to get to the bottom of this. There's a knot here. There's a weird web work here. Because now Nubia's pyramids on the dollar bill. What's up with that? What's going on? Then you get into the frequencies of Massachusetts, Boston, Massachusetts, Cambridge, where one of the most elite colleges are, and they have a Nubian square. Then you have a really strong, one of the things I didn't put on the list, there's actually a very strong Somalian population in DC too, Ethiopian as well. That's very prevalent. When I was just out there earlier this year, it's very prevalent. You can see it very clearly. Then you have a really strong Somalian presence in San Diego, California, which is known as being the first city of California. Very Moorish. It's like more central out there in San Diego. So I'm confused. So I'm trying to make meaning of this. There's been something that's been done with the history, and what I'm peeping in the dream space as well as in the mythology is it has to do with who's considered a god and who's not. That's a problem. Anyone who's trying to gatekeep my godhood, my Partheogenic codes, we got smoke. We're not doing that. It has nothing to do with your ethnicity. But if there's a frequency where your ancestors or the spirits you rocking with or working with are trying to gatekeep my creational capacities, we got smoke. Straight up. And that right there shows me that there might be a rank issue, because you wouldn't be trying so hard to gatekeep. If not, you would just be chilling. We would just be chilling. We'd be sisters. We'd be hanging out. Like, it'd be no big deal. We'd both be in our goddess. But when I'm getting into the astral, when I'm getting into the dream state, when I'm looking at my 3D relationships, things get a little weird. What's up with that? So we're going to end it with another frequency of the Horn of Africa. Now we're getting into the energies of Yemen, which is in that same frequency. I mean, this energy has been very prevalent in my life. Yemen, Somalia, Nubia, Eritrea, Ethiopia. That little horn, there's activity happening there. And Yemen, and even when we get into the frequencies of Yemen, you also have the Gulf of Aden. There's a little waterway called the Gulf of Aden that's very much warred after. And whenever there's a lot of warfare going on, that's always something to look at. And then there's also this area called Socotra Island, a really beautiful place that I'd love to go to one day. But it has more of a draconic frequency there, very Paradisian as well. But Yemen has this place. I mean, they have a lot of beautiful, interesting places. But one thing you can look at is the Yemeni goat herders. There's a very interesting dynamic. with Yemeni women. There's these Yemeni women goat herders. They're really cool looking. They wear all black and they have these like pointy hats. And it's so Saturnian. It is so Saturnian. They have this like, they don't just, it's not just a burqa that they're wearing. They're wearing this very svelte black outfit with a straw pointy hat, and then they're goat herding. And right around this particular area, there's a place known as the Well of Barhot. I don't know if I pronounced that right. The Well of Barhot. That's spelled Barhout. And it's known, if you look at the picture, y'all, it looks like a big ass black hole. It's crazy. It's really crazy. It looks like a big ass black hole right at the Horn of Africa, right where Yemen is. And the nickname of this place is called the Well of Hell. It's right around the eastern Yemen and Oman border. Oman's another place that's been peeping out to me. I think it's because I'm tapping into this Well of Hell energies or whatever. There's a very strong feminine presence in that particular horn. The Well of Barhat, the Well of Hell. There's a black hole energy that you tap into. There's a portal there, a very strong, I don't even want to call it a Saturnian portal. My hunch is that it transcends Saturn energies. Okay, it transcends that. And I've been very connected with these frequencies. But these energies are also very like protected and gate kept as well. But that's at the Yemen-Oman border. And there could be an energy of like a motherly frequency, maybe an Apkali frequency, maybe an Iyami Ajay sort of frequency as well. Okay. Right at that particular border. So yeah, those are some of the frequencies. I got questions. I'm not here to say I have all the answers. And I don't like to be talking about different countries like that. Not in that way. But I'm doing it because I need to bring this to light. And I need to figure this out. What's being hidden? There's something being hidden. And in this area, it's known as being the land of the gods. When I go into these frequencies, even though I'm very connected to it, I was getting a gatekeeper frequency. Not no more. I took care of that. Believe me with that. So I'm talking about it right now. So it's not no more. But I'm looking out for any indigenous American folks, just because this might be a script you might encounter. I'm seeing too many parallels. There's too many connections with Somalia and the Americas and Nubia and the Americas. And they're not talking about it. And it's a feminine one. It's feminine. It's not about the men. Nope. It has nothing to do with the men. It's where the real power is. It's usually going to be with the feminine. Okay. So there's something we got to get to the bottom of. It has to do with creation codes. Who's regarded as a god or goddess, who's not. Remember, creation also can mean to appoint or elect someone to an office. So Agatsi has me thinking, are the frequencies of like Somalian women, are they holding the archetype of Neith in the simulation right now? Also, same thing with like Ethiopian. Are y'all holding the archetype of Neith right now? Are you doing like how they did with Set and Heru and Osiris, and when they can't decide who's going to rule, they go to y'all and you decide? I'm asking questions. I don't know. I'm just asking questions. And I'm not just asking you questions. I'm asking your ancestors questions too. Because your ancestors is rolling up on me as well. So let's just bring everybody into the mix and let's just talk about it. Let's bring it all out to the table. Let's bring it all out to the open. This is a feminine conversation. This is where the real power is. So what's up? Let's talk. So on that note, we're going to end with my book, The Technomancy of Hyperdimensional Warfare. Okay, there's a couple of things I want to I know I put out a lot, but we're going to talk about the way gatekeeping happens in the womb specifically through the cipher. The cipher. A cipher is an encoding mechanism. It hides, masks, or replaces an original structure by overlaying it with the symbol. The word cipher comes from the Arabic sifr, meaning zero. Zero works as a cipher by creating a closed perimeter, flattening multi-directional flow into a static shape, turning a spiral into a circle. The cipher does not destroy what it covers. It simply creates a layer that must be questioned or removed in order to access what lies beneath. You feel me? Zero is a cipher because it conceals the underlying architecture of creation behind a symbol that appears neutral. The ring structure. The ring is one of the oldest containing geometries. A ring stabilizes, binds, compresses, and limits expansion. It creates a fixed orbit. It imposes repetition. Zero uses the same architecture. It is an enclosure. The ring logic of zero restricts movement to a preset loop. Everything cycles, nothing progresses, nothing unfolds, nothing escapes the perimeter. This is why zero functions as both symbol and boundary. Okay, so the easiest way to understand how influence works in a simulation is to think of yourself like a computer. I know that sounds really not cool, but hey, it'll start making more sense sometimes. And also you get out of all the feelings and the emotions and they said this, they did that. Just like looking at how things work. So if you think about the womb as being a hardware, more of the hardware, this is where programs are stored. Okay, that's how the womb has been utilized a lot of times, especially with these karmic mother programs too. It's the physical foundation firmware. It's the deep layer that tells hardware how to work. So a lot of times you'll get into an issue with karmic mother programs where they call it a rootkit firmware level malware, where you're trying to expand in your consciousness and get to the Partheogenic creational codes outside of the simulation's architecture. But it's designed like your karmic mother program is going to act like malware because it was never designed for you to expand in that way. It was always meant to cap you. That doesn't mean you reject your mother. There's actually going to be a time where you, as the being holding the Partheogenic codes, you're going to birth your mother through the portal that you create to support with an intergenerational kind of healing. I'll talk about this a little bit more on Black Diamond. I'm not going to go into it too much here. So it's not just about, oh, well, forget your, your maternal line, like forget everyone, forget all the karmic people, like I'm going to evolve, peace, deuces, No, you get to a point where you're evolving in consciousness and you're connecting with Partheogenic codes where it doesn't work like that. Like, no, it's a collective thing. So, but you might need to separate from those family members because there's so much karmic programs going on that are meant to deter you that you'll just kind of need to break from them for a while until you are able to hold a frequency of wholeness to pull them through where it doesn't feel heavy. Because if it feels too heavy, then something's off, So that's like the best way I can describe that. So firmware is the zero layer or the base. Software is the one layer, the instructions. So software, that's when we get into more of the masculine or the wand, okay? So usually the way it's been going on in the simulation is that the feminine holds the hardware or the firmware, and then the masculine holds the wand or the software, the apps. They upload the apps to the things, that sort of thing. So you're going to get to a point where you're going to start noticing that. You're going to be like, why am I carrying all this information that's not mine? Why am I carrying all these programs that I had nothing to do with their creation? That's why it's good to think of this as a like kind of more of software, like a computer sort of thing. So you can contextualize it a little bit better. So the womb is the firmware. This is the part of you that holds potential, stores deep memory, influences how you create, shapes your experience of life. Because it is foundational, it can also store old programs that did not come from you, family patterns, cultural beliefs, trauma, collective fear, lineage expectations, psychological conditioning. So I think this is the rift that I'm experiencing currently, like quite literally, the East African rift. It's literally called an East African rift. But I'm experiencing it in my particular hologram because there's some sort of familial pattern or trauma or collective belief system that I'm carrying from a previous time, and I'm trying to get to the bottom of where it came from so I can like resolve it, because it's showing. That's what will happen is it'll show up in your particular way you experience, whether you experience it with family members or friends or coworkers or in dream state and stuff like that. It also shows up a lot in my astrology as well. And I have a really strong Neptune line related to my ancestors right around that Horn of Africa too. That's really karmic. As I reverse polarize, I'm like bringing a lot of that to the surface. So, I can see this playing out in the astrological chart. I can see this playing out in the tectonic plates. I can see this playing out in the way my relationships with other East African women show up in my hologram. So it's many, many different layers and things. But this is kind of how the mechanics of the simulation works. So it says, when this happens, you may feel weighed down, stuck in old patterns, repeating cycles you thought you outgrew, affected by things that happened before you were born, unable to move forward even when you want to. So these are all of the things I just kind of like I laid out to y'all in my story, when I was talking to y'all. The reason why I went in with these different friends, it's not to typecast people, okay? It's not to typecast. It's like I'm seeing a pattern, and it's showing up in multiple different ways in my reality. This is where cache clearing comes in. A cache is a temporary storage area in a computer that collects old files. When the cache gets full, the computer slows down and keeps referencing outdated information. Humans do the same thing. We hold on to old stories, old fears, old versions of ourselves, inherited beliefs, emotional leftovers. This is called dead code. Okay, so there's like a dead code cache that I'm encountering as it relates to something related to Partheogenic codes as it relates to East Africa and the Americas, and I'm trying to get to the bottom of it. But a lot of times the way this stuff works is, yeah, you can set an intention to clear things, but it's always better to know what actually happened and to get to the root of this. So that's why I'm putting all this together. So I can play this back to and make meaning of it. And I'm also putting a call out, an ancestral call out in the collective consciousness so that we all can figure this out. Okay, whether it's in the dream state or, maybe we find an article or whatever, like whatever. If y'all are on Patreon and y'all, if you have any insight, please let me know. Message me. Let me know. Okay, why womb-coded people feel this more strongly? People who hold womb-based coding, creative, generative, foundational beings, often absorb more of these inherited programs because they operate on the firmware level. Their system is built to hold, and what holds can also accumulate. This makes cache clearing essential. When your deep layer is clear, you stop repeating patterns that aren't yours. You feel lighter and more grounded. Your creativity increases, your sovereignty returns, and you build your life instead of reacting to old programs. So I can honestly say that this is a process I've been going through. As I've been moving through these energies of the East African rift, the way that it's happened in all kinds of ways, whether it's the tectonic plates, whether it's in my ancestral records that are still being, we're still making meaning out of that, whether it's been in like certain relationships. As I'm getting to the root of these things, I'm getting more in connection with Partheogenic codes. I now can understand where the blockage was coming from as it relates to Neith. Where were the old stories coming from as well? Where were the old scripts? Because at some point I need to be Neith. I need to embody that archetype, but I was having a hard time holding that frequency because there was all this stuff, like all this BS that was in my cache, and I wasn't understanding what was going on, and it was showing up as like gatekeeping frequencies coming from East African women. Is this to say that this is everyone's story? Absolutely not. But I do believe I've been tapping into a collective ancestral record that we're going to need to get to the bottom of. Is there something going on? We got to figure this out. Okay. Let's see. The next thing I want to talk about, though, is more of an empowering current as it relates to the womb. Okay. Because I just kind of talked about something that can feel really heavy, right? Like just old information, you know. We get to the point where it's like, all right, we're done with the trauma. What about the power of the womb? How can we retrieve the power of the womb? So I wrote about this concept known as the thunder womb. And what I realized is I was tapping into the primordial energies of the goddess, who would be known as El-Lat or El Elyon. These are feminine frequencies. I know we talk about the storm god and we automatically think that that's going to be a male father deity. I am seeing that that is not so, that it is also feminine, and bare minimum, it is a jointly feminine and masculine energy, or it leans a little bit more feminine. So I think that's what I was tapping into with this thunder womb current. So, when's the last time you saw your womb as being like ability to cause atmospheric shifts? What if it's not just a storage receptacle for everyone else's BS? What if it's an active agent where you're able to make things happen or bring things to a close? That's the frequency of the thunder womb. So it says the thunder womb is what emerges when the womb stops performing the role assigned to it inside the simulation. The passive receiver, the empty vessel, the waiting architecture meant to be filled by something external. That version of the womb was not the original design. It was a scripted overlay, a behavioral instruction set bound to the ring of zero. Be receptive, be open, be waiting, be defined through what enters you. This is more of that karmic mother frequency, gatekeeper. Just hold down the simulation, just hold down the matrix at all costs. Who cares if you're karmic? Who cares if you're blocking other people's creativity? Who cares if you're blocking other people's Partheogenic codes? I'm going to hold the line of the lineage. I'm going to hold the line of my ancestors, because that's what I'm programmed to do. That's not the thunder womb current. You're not acting in like your Partheogenic codes with that. Just saying. The thunder womb is the opposite of that script. It is not receptive. It is generative, not passive, but conductive. Not an opening, but a force. It is the internal ignition system the simulation tried to quarantine by convincing women that their power must arrive from outside, from lineage, from priesthoods, from gods, from contractors. Let me tell you, that imposter neath that I saw, that was I could tell that was like a priesthood overlay. That was some, contractual lineage BS that needed to be overridden. All right. But if you can't see that, if you can't get to those layers, then those things rule over you, because Neith also is the weaver as well. But beneath every imposed cosmology, beneath every resurrection loop and mirror-based femininity program, the thunder womb has continued to pulse as a closed-circuit engine of raw creation. To feel it is to discover that the womb is not an organ of reception at all. It is a transmitter of voltage. What if the storm god is in your womb, y'all? What if El-Lat or El Elyon is the womb? Once you take off that stupid little measuring things that they're doing with Libra, that imposter frequency, what if you take that off and it's more of a generative transmitter of voltage? What if the feminine frequency also has electricity, yo? We always are taught that the feminine is more magnetic. I was taught that too. I'm actually starting to see that it might not be that way. It is the primordial server kernel where desire becomes electricity, where the serpentine current folds back into itself and converts pressure into power. It does not wait to be opened. It opens reality. It does not absorb, it emits. It does not echo, it writes. The thunder womb is what happens when the ring of zero collapses and the deeper architecture ignites. This is the primordial Partheogenic codes, not the lineage gatekeeper codes. That's not Partheogenic, by the way. Y'all just wearing a costume if you're doing that. And that's cool, you can wear the costume, but you're not partheogenic. If you're like blocking off another creative being's ability to create, like it doesn't work like that. It don't go like that. You stop cycling between receptivity and resistance and become a third thing, a sovereign generator whose power does not derive from polarity. The simulation has no category for this. It cannot compute a womb that is not defined by penetration, conception, lineage, or prophecy. It cannot map a source that generates without being acted upon. This is why the thunder womb was obscured. Because a womb that emits instead of receives does not feed the system, it rewrites it. Y'all gatekeepers, feminine gatekeepers, it's time to let it go. Because y'all are miserable. That's what I do see. Y'all hella miserable. But y'all just want to gatekeep because you just want everyone miserable. No. You're blocking yourself because you want these codes too. And you can remember these codes if you let go of these division programs. Okay, but you're going to have to take a seat and let the beings who have these primordial partheogenic codes, who remember them a little bit more clearly, who are willing to go to bat for them a little bit more, you're going to have a seat and let the primordial partheogenic feminine do their thing so they can open the space for more growth and more evolution for the collective. This is not a competition, okay? You playing yourself. In this ignition, the feminine is no longer coded as an entry point, but a force of divergence. The pulse that disrupts the binary, the strike that cracks the architecture, the voltage that destabilizes every mirror-based identity program. It shakes loose the old firmware and restores the original movement. Creation as emanation, not extraction. When the thunder womb activates, you stop relating to the world through the logic of what enters me and begin to move with the question, what do I emit that reality must rearrange itself around? This is very dark pre-creational current. We must transcend the structure of the matrix to get to this point. You see, this is why the gatekeeping's got to stop, and it will, respectfully. This is not about disrespecting the feminine. It's not about disrespecting this is actually the opposite of disrespecting the feminine or the mother. This is actually honoring it. The feminine, the primordial creative pulse does not start at the matrix. That is a straight up inversion. Come on. And you know this if you think about it hard enough. Just don't be salty about it. This is the moment when the circle breaks. This is where the spiral returns. This is where the feminine stops being a site of reception and becomes the conductor of its own world. So that's where we're going to stop it today, okay? We went around the world. We went around the world with it. We had to, okay? We went around the world with it. Because there's a global way in which we're connected. Well, more than global, it's cosmic. All right? So there's many ways that we're connected and that we're interacting and interfacing with each other, either in this realm or other realms. But the idea is to open up more portals of creation, more portals of possibility. And I want to talk specifically right now to folks, to feminines who have Moorish ancestry. Listen real close. I'm going to close it out with this. This is for the feminines who have Moorish ancestry. You're going to go through a battle, an ideological battle, sometimes a spiritual battle. There's going to be a part of you that wants to hold on to exactly the way your lineage has been doing things. By the way, I have Moorish ancestry too. I'm not excluding myself from this. This is why I'm caught up in this, because I am because we are. Okay, this is that Ubuntu sort of frequency, or what have you. But you're gonna feel a tension sometimes, because right now there's been a cover up that we are unearthing right now. Okay, there's been a massive cover up around histories on this planet. And this has to do with the Partheogenic goddess. It goes back to these primordial creation codes. Once you take off all the overlays, it's going to go back to that. But you're going to feel sometimes, and I've encountered this many times, you're going to feel sometimes an allegiance to your ancestry and the way things have always been done. And you're going to feel it really strong. But the question is that serving you? Are you able to grow and expand and create and self-seed? Or are you a gatekeeper? Or is that your prison? You're going to come up again. You might even interact with indigenous women of the Americas who maybe they have a certain partheogenic sort of frequency that they might be just, I don't want to say more attached to, but maybe they remember it a little bit more. I'm still figuring out how this whole thing works. And you're going to be attracted to them. Like you guys are going to be magnetized towards each other. Because you also have these partheogenic codes too. It's just you've got sometimes in the Moorish, when you get to the Moorish frequencies, they did a lot of imperial overlays, like a lot of them. And they did a lot of stuff to be like, well, I'm better because I got that royal bloodline. I got that emperor frequency. I got that empress frequency. But that's all matrix stuff. That's old school, and it's boring, and it's oppressing you. So I've talked to a lot of y'all, and I'll talk to more of y'all, I'm sure. And you're going to come up against this ancestral tension. Okay, you at some point are going to make a choice, but make it for you, and don't make it for anyone else outside of your growth and evolution. Always ask the question, well, what's going to evolve me? What's going to be able to allow me to bring more creation in? Go there. That might mean you're going to have to say, look, ancestors, you're going to have to fall back. It's my body. I'm in this incarnation. Okay? Y'all going to have to you're going to have to respectfully. I got this. Okay? If you are over here trying to gatekeep my creation, I'm gonna need you to fall all the way back. I've had to do that with my ancestors several times. Like, nope. Just because you're my ancestor doesn't mean that you know it all. Because that's what's going on with a lot of us, is we're interacting with each other, but it's all of our ancestors interacting at the same time. So that's why sometimes it can feel like friction or spiritual attack. It's just because there's all these stories that have been unresolved, okay? So that's going to be a tension that we work through, but just always go back to what's going to help you be in your primordial creative energy. And sometimes it's going to look like you're turning your back on your ancestors, but you're not. That's a divisive way of seeing it. It's really for you to open up portals for more growth and more expansion. Okay, there were a lot of overlays, a lot of imperial overlays to block that expansion, to gatekeep and measure the womb. But we're moving out of those frequencies. Okay, and sometimes it's going to feel weird because it's going to be like, well, am I disrespecting my ancestors? Am I going over my ancestors' head? Am I not respecting my mother? Am I not respecting my grandmother? But if you center the question around what supports creation, what supports more life, let that be your guide, okay? Because it can get a little messy sometimes, all right? As I've been demonstrating in this, I've been moving through my own stuff too. And it's really for me to remember my partheogenic codes as well. And I'll admit, sometimes I got mad. I was getting pissed. If I had done this talk maybe 2 hours ago, you might have gotten a much more fiery sort of energy from me. And I was already a little fiery on this, but I might have been more. But I had to cool out a bit, and level out. It's all about neutrality, and it's about opening more portals for creation. That's what we're here for. That's the assignment, okay? And that's only going to cause more joy. It's only going to cause more abundance and more expansion. The only thing that's going to limit us is when we try to limit ourselves and limit each other. Okay, but that we're not moving in that direction anymore. Okay, it's not the conditions that we're moving through. It's not going to be supportive for the gatekeeping. It won't. It's just going to cause more misery. All right, y'all.